Now we'll start with the fifth chapter, International Financial Institutions and Liquidity. So, under international financial institutions and liquidity, we are going to deal with two major institutions, which is nothing but International Monetary Fund and World Bank. So, International Monetary Fund and World Bank are called as two children of Bretton Woods system. So, after the Second World War, we had a series of conferences that was done in New Hampshire from July 1st to July 22nd. So, based on the agreement, in the year 1944, we had 44 nations agreeing for the establishment of one particular fund, and it is called as International Monetary Fund. So, basically, there were two major victorious countries post World War II, and they were US and UK. So, from US, Mr. White, and from UK, Mr. Keane. So, both White and Keane had their plans. So, both these plans were merged, and then they started to have a Bretton Woods system, and that particular result of the Bretton Woods system was International Monetary Fund. So, International Monetary Fund started its operation from March 1st, 1947, and from 44 members in 1947, it has grown to 189 member countries in the year 2019. So basically, the International Monetary Fund is started or established to find or to promote economic and financial cooperation among its member country. I repeat, it is only among its member countries. So only when you are part of IMF, you avail this cooperation. If you are not part of IMF, you can't expect any such financial or economic cooperation. And it is also going to help the member countries to have a expansion and balanced growth in the world trade. So I have already explained you what is balance of payment in your second chapter, the foreign exchange market. So there I've told you, right? A country is going to have its transaction with the rest of the world, and it is going to be documented in the double entry system. So this balance of payment will either have a debit balance or a credit balance, and most of the time it is going to have debit balance. Debit balance is deficit. So when you have deficit in the balance of payment, you can go and ask the IMF, and IMF will give you enough funds to overcome that deficit. So that is one of the main objective as why IMF has been established. And as far as the objectives of IMF are concerned, it is mainly to avoid competitive devaluation. I have already told you, devaluation is a deliberate attempt to lower the value of the domestic currency in comparison to foreign currency, so that our exports would become cheaper and we can improvise our exports. So the deliberate attempt to lower a country's currency is called as devaluation. So you cannot have a competitive devaluation or exchange control in the international market, because now we have globalized markets. So we have market free economies in the most of the countries. So when we have such market free economies where entire prices and the exchange rates are determined based on the demand and supply conditions, you cannot have the indulgence in such control. And to establish and maintain currency convertibility with stable exchange rates, so you have to have currency convertibility at a stable exchange rate. You cannot have deviations in the exchange rate quite often. When you have deviation in your exchange rate, you are going to witness fluctuations, and you are not going to find stability in your own currency. So to reduce that instability, you will definitely have to have the stable exchange rate, and to develop more multilateral trade payments and to expand the international trade of the member countries. The objective of IMF is being stated in the Article 1 of the Fund Agreement, and mainly they are started to have international monetary cooperation through a permanent institution. So it is going to provide a mechanism to deal with the all international monetary problems, and again it is going to help in providing the funds to maintain the balanced growth of international trade. Again, it is going to help to reduce competitive exchange depreciation, to assist in the establishment of multilateral payments, and again to have a uniformity in the settlement of international transactions, and to provide confidence among the member countries in vulnerable situations. Again, if they have any sort of disequilibrium in balance of payment, they can always the member countries can always go and consult IMF will help them in fixing such disequilibrium problems faced by the member countries. The functions of IMF. So IMF is also called as the guardian of good conduct. So basically, when they have balance of payment problems or any other trade restrictions or any other international monetary transaction settlement problems, or if they have any problem in balancing the currency rates or exchange rate fluctuation, they can always seek the help of IMF. The IMF experts will help the member countries to get through these problems. Organization structure. IMF is an autonomous organization affiliated to United Nations organization. So the organization structure of IMF consists of board of governors, executive board, a managing director. IMF secretariat helps the managing director in carrying out the activities. Again, they have interim committee, development committee. So board of governors, they are the ultimate decision making body of the fund. So it is going to have maximum powers, and they are going to be the major decision makers. So usually the board of governors consists of one governor and one alternative governor appointed by every member country. For example, now we have 189 member countries in the IMF. So 189 member countries must also have one governor and one alternative governor appointed, and these two people or these two persons will be part of the board of governors. And usually the finance minister, right, the country will appoint finance minister or the governor of the central bank as the governor. So the governor will have the right to vote. Again, only one right will be given for one member country. The board of governors meet once in a year, and they are going to preview all the activities of the IMF. And any 5 member countries which are going to have 25% of the total voting right can convene a special meeting. However, power to take major decisions, they are going to have the access to funds resources. They have the ability to decide the charges and remunerations to be paid for the executives. They have the ability to review the fund and do the consultation services as well. And the executive board, that is, after board of governors, the next level is executive board, and the executive board has 21 members, and 5 major members of fund are appointed by the largest quotas. So usually the voting rights are dependent on the quotas of every member country, basically their contribution towards the fund. And constantly we have 5 member countries who will be part of this executive board. They are US, UK, Germany, France and Japan. And the 6th executive director is appointed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and remaining 15 would be directed by the remaining member countries. And the member countries, the largest decision making body would be board of governors. But for these decisions that the board of governors take, the executive board can provide certain supervisory services or regulatory services or financial services, and of course they are going to help the board of governors in taking the decisions. Managing director, so the executive directors elect the managing directors. So usually a politician will be the managing director, and he will not have any voting power. I repeat, managing director will be a politician and he will not have the voting power, but he would be called as the chairman of the board and head of the fund. The interim committee has got 22 members, and it was created in 1974. And basically, again, they provide advisory services to board of governors on supervising affairs, and they provide advisory services in adapting to the international monetary system, or any discrepancies that they have got in international monetary system. They always look up to the interim committee, who will work internally and fix the problem. The development committee, again, it was established in the same year in which interim committee was established, and it is also going to provide advisory services, but they provide in the name of transfer of real resources to the developing countries. So the following figure is the organizational structure of IMF. Board of governors at the top, they are the highest decision making body, having the maximum powers and rights, and followed by executive board of directors, who have 21 member countries, and based on their quota contribution. Then managing director is a chairman. They will not have voting right. They would be called as the head of the IMF secretariat. Under IMF secretariat, interim committee and development committee will work, and they are going to provide advisory services directly to the board of governors. This is the organizational structure of International Monetary Fund. Next, we have voting rights. How the voting rights are worked in the International Monetary Fund. So usually the voting rights are determined by quotas. Quota is nothing but the contribution that you are going to provide to the IMF. Each member country has 250 basic voting right, irrespective of quotas. So you will have 250 votes irrespective of your quota, and the next increment after 250 would be determined based on your quota. So in addition to that, member country has one voting right for every quota of SDR 1 lakh. As such, so that is how the quotas are being organized, or what is the composition of quota. The capital of IMF is represented by general account, and it is contributed by the quotas allocated to the member countries. So usually the quota determines the size of subscription of the member country. Greater the quota, greater will be the subscription, and again it is going to determine the voting power. I told you, right, every member country will have 250 votes irrespective of quota. Later on, for 1 lakh SDR, you will get one extra voting right. So likewise, your quota will decide your voting power, and also it is going to provide drawing rights to the member country. On a whole, quota will determine the voting right, quota will determine the subscription, quota will determine the drawing rights. Quotas, how they are going to be exactly composed. 2% will be from the national income of the member country, 5% in the form of gold or US dollar reserve of the member country, 10% on average annual imports of the member country, 10% in average, that is maximum variation in the exports, and fifth one would be the sum of all, that is 2% of national income, 5% of gold and US dollar, 10% of average annual imports, and 10% of variation in export. And the payment methodology, During the time of formation, the members were required to pay 25% of its quota in the form of gold and 10% in the form of net official holdings, that is in the form of either gold or US dollar. And again later it was modified in the year 1978, and later they bought a different methodology, that is as of now 25% has to be done in the form of SDR or hard currency. I have already explained you, under SDR we have four major currencies, or they are called as basket of currency. It is US dollar, UK pounds, Japanese yen and European euros. So it can be done in either of these currencies, and the member can pay remaining 75% in its own currency, which can be deposited in its central bank. For example, RBI. RBI is the Central Bank of India, and India is the member country of IMF. So India has to provide or contribute 25% of the subscription in the form of SDR, that is any of the hard currency, and remaining 75% it should keep in the name of IMF with RBI itself. So that is how they have to make the payment method. For example, India is contributing hypothetically 1 crore rupees, hypothetically. In 1 crore, 25 lakh they have to make the payment in the form of either SDR or any hard currency. It can be US dollar or UK pound sterling or Japanese yen or European euros. But the remaining 75 lakhs has to be kept in the name of IMF in RBI itself. This is how the payment methodology works. And the fund dealing this practice of subscribing the capital in the form of gold. So they stopped subscribing the capital in the form of gold. It is only in the form of hard currency and domestic currencies. 25% hard currency, 75% it should be kept in its own reserves. Revising the quotas, again the fund revised the quotas, and every 5 years once in every 5 years they are going to review this methodology. And they can also meet the growing demand for finance with the majority of 85% of the total voting rights. And as far as financial resources are concerned, usually the fund can be raised through the contribution made by the member countries, and it can also be done in the form of selling the gold reserves to its member, or it can also be from the governments of the different member countries, or central banks, or private financial institutions, or it can also be international institutions like Bank for International Settlements or oil and petroleum exporting countries. So all such resources are being opted by IMF to get the funds. And general agreements to borrow, GAB, it is called as general agreements to borrow. So this scheme was bought in the year 1962, where it can also be a methodology to get the funds into IMF. And fund lending, the fund provides loans to the member countries in the form of foreign currency. Usually they can get 25%, up to 25% of its quota, and generally for freely, as they contribute to the general account in the form of gold. And this has to be paid within 3 to 5 years, or the loan has to be used within 3 to 5 years. And they can use this to reduce the disequilibrium in BOP, and they also help to provide the funds to reduce the disequilibrium in BOP. The shortfall of the members' currency, so that is nothing but reserve tranche. Very, very important from 2 marks point of view. So the member country can draw up to 25% of its reserve tranche automatically from the fund. So there is no interest on such drawings, and it has to be repaid within the period of 5 years. So the member country can draw 25% of its reserve tranche. Credit tranche. Credit tranche is the remaining balance of quota after drawing 25% of reserve tranche. So for example, India has got 5 lakh worth reserve tranche. So it can draw up to 25% of the 5 lakhs at free interest rate. And the remaining after 25% of the reserve tranche, that is the 75% of reserve tranche, is called as credit tranche. So both are very, very important for 2 marks. And reserve tranche, credit tranche, and they do have different facilities, that is buffer stock facility. This was introduced in the year 1969, where you can draw up to 30% of your quota. Then extended fund facility was introduced in the year 1974, and you can get loan equal to 100% of your quota, and usually the duration for such loans would be 10 years. Then supplementary financing facility. Usually the payments are made, suppose if a country is facing a serious BOP problem, then in such situation they can definitely avail supplementary financing facility, and they provide subsidies for the payments. Then structural adjustment facility. So if they have chronic balance of payment problem, a serious problem, or adjustment, structural disequilibrium, then they can also be they can also avail loans at the structural adjustment facility. Then enhanced structural adjustment facility. So again, they are also provided, but the provision is only for low income countries. Then compensatory and contingency financing facility. So usually when they have shortage in the importation of essentials like the cereals or pulses, then they can go for compensatory and contingency financing facility. Then other operations of the fund, of course, they help in exchange rate stability, getting exchange rate stability. Suppose if your currency is fluctuated on a day-to-day basis, if you lose control over your exchange rate regime, then you can ask the experts of IMF to fix the problem. The IMF will definitely intervene, and they are going to fix the exchange rate problem and get the stability in your currencies. And they also provide loans and credit facilities for other central banks. So it is called as bank for central banks. And they also provide training and technical assistance. So usually they provide technical assistance when they have certain monetary policy issues. If a country is facing certain monetary policy issue, then the IMF experts will provide them the technical assistance as to how the policy has to be chalked out, and thus they provide, they help the member countries to have, fixation of such problems. Next, expansion of global trade. Of course, they provide, credit facilities, they provide, quota facilities, they provide, a trade mechanism, they help in BOP problems, fixation of BOP problems. So they also help in expansion of international trade. So all such initiatives that the IMF is going to undertake will definitely help in expansion of global trade. But they do face a lot of criticisms. One such criticism is, conditions of loan. So usually the interest rates of IMF is comparatively costlier. Not every country can have the affordability to get the loans from the IMF. Again, the conditions are also, determined based on the quota contribution by the member countries. So that is also one of the problem or criticism that IMF faces. And exchange rate reforms, again, there was some controversies or conspiracies surrounding the exchange rate reforms that was brought by IMF. And again, they also have involved in inflationary devaluation. So that is, when devaluation was suggested by IMF, the country was facing a high rate of inflation, and again that was a problem for the member country. That was one of the criticism that IMF faced. And neoliberal criticism. So usually they help, or they encourage more of privatization. So when they encourage more of privatization, they are trying to create more private monopolies in this process, so that is also one of the criticism. And free market criticism, of course, they are the believers of free market. So when they have more encouragement for free market, they are encouraging more privatization, and thus they are having the criticism as they provide less role for the governments, and lack of transparency and involvement. Of course, they do have certain politics involved in the organizational structure, and there are lack of transparencies when it comes to the developed countries. The policies that they pitch in, they have certain transparency in publicizing such reforms, and they also helped certain military dictatorship by providing funds, and that was one serious criticism that IMF faced. But IMF did come up with its own response for the criticisms that it faced. One such thing was, usually whenever there is crisis, it always leads to difficulty. So when we are providing the solution, you always have the difficulty in coping up with that solution, is what IMF came defending about itself. And of course, IMF did have its own successes, and it also got confidence among the central banks of the member countries by providing the funds as and when it required. And they are not there is no compulsion as to avail loans from the member countries, for the member countries. For example, there is no compulsion for India to always avail loan from the IMF or World Bank. So only when India needs, they can avail the loans. If not, they don't have to. And IMF has become an easy target because they are the international institution. If anything happens, if any disturbance happens at international monetary level, since they are the major institution, it's always a easier way to blame IMF in every possible manner. Again, there are certain differences between IMF and World Bank. IMF will be always international monetary system. It oversees international monetary system, but World Bank is going to promote economic development among world's poorer countries. And as far as IMF is concerned, you are having always exchange rate stabilities or BOP related aspect, but in the World Bank you are going to get long-term loans for the development projects. It can also be infrastructural projects. And IMF has got 2,300 staff members from 182 member countries, whereas World Bank has 7,000 staff members from 180 member countries. And of course, IMF draws financial resources from quotas or subscriptions, whereas World Bank will draw these resources from international bond market. IMF has its disposal fully paid quotas totaling to SDR 212 billion, whereas the authorized capital of World Bank is $184 billion US dollars, and members pay only 10% on this. So basically, the difference between IMF and World Bank has been asked quite multiple times. It's very, very important from examination point of view. Next, we have international liquidity and special drawing rights. So basically, the central banks of countries have to maintain internationally acceptable assets like bullion or international borrowings or commercial credit operations or hard currencies, foreign securities and SDRs in order to settle the deficit balance of BOP position. So the aggregate stock of internationally acceptable assets of all the central banks of the world is called as international liquidity, or it is also called as international reserves. It is also called as international reserves. And components of international liquidity are gold dollars with national monetary authorities, central banks, and with international monetary entities, and dollar reserves, pound sterling, then all the major currencies. Then when it comes to the problems of international liquidity, of course, one major problem is it depends on, especially the developing countries will face it harder to maintain that international reserves when they themselves have not got enough reserves to make the international settlement. And international reserves and international liquidity are part of international